Earlier today, I caught up with Galen Druk with the 538 Politics podcast to talk about that much anticipated speech tonight and what else is buzzing in Milwaukee on this final day of the RNC. Tonight, former President Donald Trump's expected to formally accept the party's nomination. Any insight to what the focus will be in his speech tonight?
Yeah, I think if the first three nights of the convention are any indication, there's going to be talk about unity and broadening the Republican tent. You know, I was at previous Republican conventions and have heard Donald Trump give a lot of speeches. Sometimes they can be divisive, sometimes they can get onto more controversial topics. I do not think we're going to hear much of that tonight. We've heard a lot about the issues that Americans care most about, framing Republican policy as popular, pitching themselves to swing voters, not just the base. And I think we're also, of course, going to hear about that assassination attempt last Saturday. I mean, it's clear to say that this has painted the former president in more of a sympathetic role than he otherwise would be in tonight.
What's kind of been the response? You know, last night we got to hear from Senator J.D. Vance for the first time as he has now accepted that position as the former president's running mate. What's kind of been the feeling in the hall today following his speech?
Yeah, the crowd was pretty raucous, I should say. I mean, there was one moment in particular that stood out where J.D. Vance talked about his mom. And of course, he wrote the book Hillbilly Elegy, which is about growing up in eastern Ohio in an impoverished community where there were addiction issues. And his mother also suffered from addiction. And he talked about how she'll be 10 years sober in January and that he's asked, you know, the former president, if we're in the White House, can we have the celebration there? The crowd broke out into chants for JD's mom. It was definitely a touching moment, and it also gets at something sort of more significant electorally as well, which is that when Donald Trump chose JD Vance as his running mate, he was doubling down on a strategy that he started in 2016, which is appealing to white working class voters in the upper Midwest who may have traditionally voted for Democrats. You know, it's been a while since we focused in on this group of the electorate, but those Obama-Trump voters, I mean, that is the kind of voter that J.D. Vance is trying to appeal to. And you heard that throughout his speech last night, talking about how he symbolizes the American dream and can speak to it. And if you look at the polling today, those upper Midwestern states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, are where we see some of the closest numbers between Trump and Biden.
And, you know, moving forward, the Republican Party has a lot of forward momentum after this week, certainly after last night and after tonight, you know, speeches as well. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party, they're looking with a lot of uncertainties over whether or not President Biden will continue in this election to seek re-election or if he is going to be kind of forced to step down. What are the polls showing as far as voters? Do we care about the people? Do we care about policies and parties?
Yeah, it's an important question here. So when you actually ask Democrats, do you think that Joe Biden should stay in the race running for president in 2024? A majority say no. And in fact, we've seen that number growing. I'm not just talking about broadly the American public. I am talking about Joe Biden's voters. They think that he should step out. And as we've heard, a lot of the elites in the party feel the same way. So the pressure is clearly growing. Part of that calculus, I think, is a governing calculus. You know, they question whether or not the current president can serve until he's 86. But I think, as you mentioned, part of it is electoral. Currently, nationally, Biden trails Trump by about 2.5 points. And Trump is ahead of Biden by even more in some of those key battleground states that I mentioned. And so I think Democrats are worried that if they don't change something up, they will not be able to win in November. I should say, I don't think the cake is fully baked. You never want to say never in things like this. You can get yourself into trouble making bold predictions. But I do think Democrats are very worried, not just about the top of the ticket, but about trying to win back the House. And it looks like they're quite likely actually to lose the Senate chamber.
All right, Galen Druk with 538 Politics. Thank you so much for joining us.